Welcome to Puro Politics, the political podcast of the San Antonio Express News. My name is Gilbert Garcia, opinion writer and columnist, and I'm joined by
Metro editor Greg Jefferson.
Nancy Prayer Johnson, deputy editorial board editor of the editorial board.
Got a lot of news happening in San Antonio and in Texas over the past week. And I wanted to start with Greg with a story that you did, which was about some big news about JCB, a British manufacturing company that's going to be bringing a plant to the south side, right?
Yeah, 1,500 jobs over a 5-year period. This company, it's gigantic. That said, like, most of us had never heard
I'd never heard.
Yeah, but yeah.
I'm glad you said that because I was feeling kind of bad about it.
One of the world's largest makers of construction equipment. This is like backhoes, telescopic extenders, excavators, that kind of thing. Really heavy stuff. And yeah, so they're going to be opening a plant on the south side. They're looking at 2 sites right now. They haven't really selected one. But when they're ready to select a site, it's going to be about 400 acres or more. Then they're going to build a factory, and we'll have a lot more detail on that and the cost, probably once they settle on the property.
It's 1,500 jobs. They're saying at least 1,500 over 5 years. I mean, is the sense that these are primarily going to be San Antonians are going to be?
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, I mean, the company had to have surveyed the market and determined that there's enough of a manufacturing workforce to justify a move here. That's always one of the top considerations of any manufacturer looking to expand into San Antonio. Do you have the workforce? That said, they'll probably have an agreement with the city's taxpayer-funded Ready to Work program. This is the skills training and education program. So yeah, I mean, some of the workers will probably be coming from Ready to Work.
What do we know so far about what kind of incentives?
Well, we don't know what the city has offered, but we do know that the Texas Enterprise Fund, which is the deal closing fund that Governor Greg Abbott is so proud of. And I mean, in fairness, this got started under Rick Perry. Yeah. Actually, it was the Toyota project on San Antonio's south side that really started the Enterprise Fund. That's kind of how it got going. So it's JCB is getting a $5.7 million grant from the fund. The county is granting or is likely to approve a 10-year property tax abatement, and they'll be reimbursing. I wrote this down. About $5 million worth of infrastructure improvements that the manufacturer is going to make at the site, and then there's another $250,000 for the creation of jobs that pay over $28 an hour.
And you said that that this was all predicated on the idea that there was the workforce here, right? That would work for JCB. I mean, is there anything beyond that you think it says about San Antonio, like that something positive that we can take from them?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think so much of manufacturing in San Antonio kind of flows from Toyota's decision.
Right.
In the early aughts to open a pickup plant in San Antonio. That's why you saw Navistar open a facility here. They make, heavy duty commercial trucks. They're doing it on the south side. And that was, it's funny that they announced that 5 years ago. It wouldn't have been here had it not been for Toyota, probably.
So we're seeing like the multiplier effect for this 20 years later. It's
I think that's great that it's on the south side. You said $28. So what is the salary range?
We don't know yet.
We don't know yet. Okay.
Yeah. And that's, that's a county grant. Yeah. That's aspirational. Like if they create
28 is great.
Then they'll get the grant. If not, then they won't get the grant.
I think that would, work really well with the workforce program. And then also hopefully high schools will get on board too in a way and help, because some of these can be done with certificates out of high school as well. And I know a lot are doing that too, but just imagine like the prospects of this. I mean, it could really change the South Side, especially, and we really need better jobs, as we all know.
Yeah. I mean, when Toyota moved to the South Side, there was a lot of a lot of boosterism, as you can imagine. I mean, I covered it at the time, and I just remember a lot of the rhetoric was about, okay, everything's going to be fine now. Yeah. The South Side will be remade. I think the expectations were exaggerated, but I think it's been borne out over time. I mean, I do think that was a really significant win for the South Side that just keeps kind of building on itself. So 20 years on, it's like that was a great project to land because it's led to these other really major jobs developments.
Yeah, fascinating. A few days ago, we had a story from Molly Smith in the Express News about someone who we've talked about on the podcast over the years many times, Greg Brockhouse, former councilman, two-time mayoral candidate, and probably one of the more fascinating political figures that we've seen in San Antonio in recent history. He is saying that he is interested in running either for city council or for mayor in 2025, which is really early to be kind of declaring your intentions.
Yeah.
Couple of interesting things. One is that he lives in District 8 now. He was a District 6 councilman, right. So he was representing the west and far west side. Now he'd be on the north side, and this is a district that is going to. District 8 seat would be. Open in 2025.
Yeah, Manny Pelaez.
Manny
Pelaez is at the end of his term limit.
That's right, and he's probably going to run for mayor.
He's going to run for mayor. Right.
So this is going to be an open seat. So he's not going to. He wouldn't be challenging an incumbent. If he runs for mayor, of course, it's going to be a really crowded field and a real mess there. What are your thoughts about Greg Brockhouse in 2025 as a political candidate in San Antonio?
As a mayoral candidate?
Because it makes a big difference. Let's start with mayoral.
It does. Although, I mean, let's take the mayor's race first. I mean, to me, I think it was instructive that when Molly Smith, Molly a couple of weeks ago did a story, just because there's so much early buzz about the mayor's race, just because the seat is going to be open for the first time since 2009. I mean, there's no incumbent mayor, and we've got well over a dozen names that are kind of in circulation. Actually, much more than that. To me, it was instructive that. Greg Brockhouse wasn't one of them. I mean, we talked to a number of political consultants, those who keep tabs on this kind of thing, number of insiders, and it just didn't, his name just didn't come up. So the story ran, and then, we heard Greg's still around, and he's now in District 8, and he's kind of weighing his options. It's either going to be a mayor's race or it's going to be a District 8 race. I think a mayor's race, after losing two mayoral campaigns, it's really tough. His day might be over for a citywide race.
Yeah. In 2019, he challenged. He'd been on city council for only one term. Right. Decided to give up that seat in District 6 and challenged Ron Nirenberg, and it went to a runoff. He lost by a little more than 2 percentage points. It was an incredibly close race. Came back 2 years later. The climate had changed. I think 2019, there were a lot of culture war issues that were kind of percolating. We had the Chick-fil-A situation where Chick-fil-A had lost the vending contract for the airport because of their sort of association with anti-LGBTQ forces. And there was a lot of on the political right, there was a lot of anger about that. Greg Brockhouse, that was an issue he talked about. There were people upset about San Antonio not bidding for their Republican National Convention.
Not thrilled with that decision. Yeah, it excited a lot of people. In retrospect, I mean, I still think Chick-fil-A was a silly campaign issue. Yeah. But I know there are a lot of people who feel very strongly about it. But
you never hear people talk about it now.
That's right. Time hasn't treated that whole episode well. But at the time, it animated a lot of people, and that helped Greg Brockhouse.
And then Nirenberg was seen by people on the political right as kind of as this, politically correct or sort of woke mayor, and it may be symbolic of things that they didn't like about where the city was going.
Yeah.
in 2021, we're coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, as you've talked about on the podcast, Greg. That really sort of changed the perception of Ron Nirenberg in San Antonio, because all that he did during that time. And Greg Brockhouse came back late. We can talk in a minute about the domestic violence issues that have hovered over Greg Brockhouse's political career in recent years. And even with those stories around this, these are stories that were written by Brian Chasnoff for the Express News in 2019. Even with those stories, he did very well in the mayoral race. But I felt that 2 years later, when he got into it, I always felt that part of his motivation was to maybe rectify the ugliness of that 2019 campaign and maybe come back in a different way. And it just didn't resonate at all. And he lost by 30 percentage points. So I agree with you that I don't see him as a viable mayoral candidate. I think city council would be a different, possibly a different story. I mean, what do you think, Nancy?
I think city council could probably be an introduction, right, and get back into it if he's able to get that. I do think the mayor would be. I think it would be tough, especially because the other contenders. I mean, you have really strong people, some who are council people now, especially the very strong Latinas, and we know that very powerful, strong Latinas do really well in San Antonio. I just think it would be hard to beat them.
Yeah,
I think the domestic violence thing is. It's an interesting situation, especially for San Antonio, because as we know, domestic violence is such a huge deal. And, but his wife did stand by his side and kind of denied everything, right? Basically.
And for those who, weren't in San Antonio at the time, or maybe don't remember, in 2019, while he was running for mayor, Brian Chasnoff of the Express News wrote a story about two incidents that happened. One was in 2006 with Greg Brockhouse's second wife, Christine. They were splitting up at the time. She called the police, alleging domestic violence. Greg Brockhouse was adamant that this was a fight between her and her new boyfriend, and that he was the victim in this case. He was very defiant about that. But the second incident was there was a lot of mystery about that, because this was a 2009 incident involving his current wife, Annalisa. She had called the police and said that he grabbed her, threw her to the ground, and tried to hit her. Brockhouse got that report expunged. And so when the story came up, he was claiming this is fake news and so on. He was doing interviews where people were kind of asking him, is this story just completely made up? Is this not a real report? And he was kind of being coy about it. He would never come out and say, well, no, this did not happen. This report is fake, but he would kind of play along with the idea that it might be. And then after the election, he and his wife did a TV interview, and she said that, if I remember, she said she was going to postpartum depression, and that she did call the police, but that she regretted it, and it wasn't what was depicted. So this is a very tough story for him that he's, I mean, you can't shake something like that.
It's hard because, of course, especially in San Antonio, because we know a lot of victims of domestic violence recant, or they'll just they stand by their man, and not only San Antonio, but other places too. But, it's just, okay, well, there's doubt there. Like, okay, is she just doing that because she stayed with him and she's just trying to, make it look a little bit better there? But of course, that doubt's always going to be there. And especially in San Antonio, people remember. And so when he runs, I mean, he knows that this is going to be part of his opposition. He knows this is going to come up, And
again, he was not honest about it. He could have said this incident, there was a report. Right. It wasn't, he could have made the argument, which he made later, that that it didn't happen the way it was written about in the report. But he didn't do that during the campaign. He just wouldn't even talk about the report, and kind of played along with this idea that the report was fake
until that interview. Yeah, that was it KSAT?
Yeah, I think so. So that, I think there was a lack of honesty beyond everything else in the way he handled it, which I think has kind of colored his career. One of the things that's really interesting to me about him is that he became kind of the champion of conservatives in that 2019 election, particularly. And he is somebody who would worked with the police union, and which was very anti then city manager Cheryl Scully. And so he was probably as big an enemy as Cheryl Scully at the time. And so he became associated with the political right. I think it's interesting when you look at his career because, he helped to get Ray Saldana, a young progressive Democrat, elected to city council and served on his staff. I think he was his chief of staff early on. Previously, he'd worked on the staff of Mary Alice Cisneros, who was probably maybe a moderate Democrat if you had to define her. And I think when Brockhouse first got elected to city council, I remember him saying, well, people are going to be surprised. They think I'm this super right-wing person. I'm really not like that. I think he always has had this perception of himself as a moderate. But a combination of forces. I think the way he probably pandered on the Chick-fil-A issue because he thought this is the lane that I have to win. Possibly.
This is how I'll win.
And he does have sharp political instinct.
I was going to say, great instinct.
Yeah.
I mean, he jumped on it. I mean, he nearly beat that horse to death riding it, and got far with it.
And he has a podcast, right? Lately, I think I remember seeing a podcast.
I think it was discontinued. He was talking about restarting it.
Okay.
He's always sort of chafed at the idea that he's this ultra right wing person, but then at the same time he's kind of played up to that image, and it's always there's this internal conflict that I can always sense. I think he sees himself as this kind of pro business moderate,
right?
But
I mean, it's like look, he's right now he owns a mattress and furniture store on the Northwest Side. During the pandemic, he had a janitorial company that basically went out of business in large part because of the pandemic. So, clearly he can identify with small business owners in a way a lot of other office seekers can't. Yet, I mean, he's got a lot of baggage. A lot of baggage. Primarily the arrest report or the incident report that he never truly acknowledged until after the 2019 election. He has very little chance, I think, of winning a mayor's race in District 8. If he decides to run there, that's not a gimme. I mean, it's not. Yeah, I mean, Manny Pelias told Molly Smith in her story last week that, District 8 is, yes, it's a Northside district, and we tend to think of those as more conservative voters, and that may be true, but it's just a tiny bit left of center, and it's not at all clear that the electorate in District 8 is lined up with Greg Brockhouse and his politics.
It might be as close to like a 50-50 district. And this is Ron Nirenberg's old city council district.
That's right.
You had Reed Williams, who is pretty much kind of a maverick figure. I mean, he's kind of he later ended up running for office as Republican, but I don't think I think he sees himself as an independent.
So
there's a kind of an
pragmatic.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, Brockhouse is a very skilled campaigner. He's a really engaging person, no matter what anybody says about him. There's just, it's undeniable.
With voters,
how was he on the Trump stuff? Like, where did he stand with Trump and with the big lie and all of that? I don't remember that.
That's a very good question.
Does he have that conservative far right baggage? Because
I don't think he said much. I mean, the most recent thing we've seen him do politically was he worked on Trishta Berry's campaign for county judge, her unsuccessful campaign. And I mean, the fact that he was involved in that,
right?
And I think flirted with the idea of possibly competing for her seat. He decided, I'm going to concentrate on helping her get elected county judge. But when she stepped aside as county commissioner, he thought about competing when the Republicans decided who their nominee was going to be. So he just can't stay out of politics. I mean, he loves
politics. Help him if he's not so far right, like the other conservatives who run in our city, who are just so far right that it's like a joke, that there's just no way that they're going to garner the support. But that could possibly help him if he's not. But I don't know. I don't remember where he stood. Or if he's
taking a few years off could also help him. I mean, he just looks like he wants it too much. You know what I mean? I mean,
well,
it's pretty early, like to be talking.
It is early.
But I think he's he'll probably work as hard as anybody.
He's probably just trying to test the waters and see what people, right?
Yeah.
Like he's trying to see.
I mean, it's like, look, he didn't contact us for this story. We contacted him, and I think initially he just didn't really want to mess with it.
Yeah.
Finally, he returned Molly's phone call and they had a really good interview. But it was clear he's thinking about it a lot. I'm sure he would much rather have maybe I don't know, picked an office before talking.
Right.
Yeah.
But, it played out the way it played out.
Yeah, as you said, I mean, this isn't something he was initiating. So
Right.
Wanted to talk a little bit about what's been happening in Austin for the past few days. Last Monday, as we were doing our podcast, where we were talking about school vouchers, and I recommend everybody who's listening to read Nancy's column on school vouchers. We were talking with Marisa Bono last week about that issue, and the legislature started its third special session dealing with vouchers, among other issues. And as this was happening, you had this escalation in the feud between Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and Texas House Speaker Dade Phelan. These two guys haven't been speaking to each other for quite a while. They were in conflict over the impeachment of Ken Paxton. Dade Phelan was supportive of it. Dan Patrick thought that the House rushed to judgment and thought it was a disgrace. And so this has just been kind of building up. And one of the things that Dade Phelan was upset about was the fact that Dan Patrick accepted $3 million from Defend Texas Liberty, which is a political action committee that was supportive of Ken Paxton. And the idea that he accepted this money in the weeks leading up to being the judge while the Senate was going to try Ken Paxton. This was something that bothered Dade Phelan a lot. Well, another issue popped up with Defend Texas Liberty on October 6th, when they invited neo-Nazi Nick Fuentes to their offices and had a meeting of like more than 6 hours apparently with him. So Dade Phelan last week again called on Dan Patrick to return the money that any organization who's associating with Nick Fuentes, and keeping in mind this meeting happened the day before. I mean, they did not know that this attack was going to happen, but the day after this meeting with Nick Fuentes happened, you had Hamas launch a terrorist attack against Israeli civilians. And so last week, Dade Phelan was calling on Dan Patrick to return the money. Dan Patrick has responded by saying that Dade Phelan should resign. I mean, can things get any worse? I think that we've kind of hit bottom now. Between these two,
I don't know where it would go from here.
Oh, don't even. It's going to get worse, I'm sure. Anytime you say that.
Right. That said, I mean, I think any criticism of any meeting with Nick Fuentes is totally legitimate.
Yeah. Yeah. The idea that, and Defend Texas Liberty is led by Jonathan Stickland, former state representative. The idea that Stickland thought that discussing anything with Nick Fuentes, and I don't want to get into all the things Nick Fuentes has said, but it's there, it's out there, it's easy enough for people to find, and just awful, offensive thing after another. So many anti-Semitic statements. I don't know what you'd want to talk to Nick Fuentes about. And Scott Braddock for 6 hours with the Quorum Report has said that his sources have told him that Nick Fuentes visited with Defend Texas Liberty previously, like about a month before. Mm-hmm. So it shouldn't be that hard for Dan Patrick to just say, Dan Patrick has other sources of funding. I don't think it should be that hard for him to say, I don't need this money. But I think it's the money, but I think it's also disassociating himself with that group and how that's going to play with the Republican base, which would probably not work.
What do you call it? A blunder or something? But I'm going to keep the money. Well, how convenient. Yeah. But wasn't there's something with Torchies, right? And there was like a video of somebody there, and then they had was it a swastika on their arm or something that was part of it? And Torchies put out this hate response to it. But all of it, I mean, such wild politics right now in Texas. It's ridiculous. But this back and forth, this bickering, if you check out either one of their Twitter feeds, they're just back and forth, just attacking each other. And it's like, are we in junior high here? I used to teach junior high, and it did kind of remind me of junior high students. Yeah. But these are our elected leaders, and this is how they're conducting themselves. And you just wonder, of course, what could they better be doing with their time rather than this feud? Right.
And it makes you wonder what Dan Patrick thinks of Nick Fuentes and his importance, or the lack of importance, to the Republican base. Mm-hmm. I mean, is he Is he a consequential figure? Is that why he can't disavow what this contribution and give it back? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Do they really? They don't need that $3 million. They're doing very well. Although $3 million is quite a bit.
But it's this is part of a division that we see in the Republican Party. Dade Phelan is talking about the political rot involved here. He feels, I think, that Dan Patrick helped to gain the acquittal of Ken Paxton, who, I think many objective people would look and say has been a corrupt attorney general. Mm-hmm. And so I think Dade Phelan is coming at it from the angle that this is really that all this kind of stuff is embarrassing to the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. And a lot of this is personal between him and Dan Patrick, but I think there is some kind of philosophical issue there. And as this was happening, we saw Will Hurd from Pelotas, who had launched a long shot campaign for a Republican presidential nomination. I mean, he didn't make it into either of the two presidential debates. Mm-hmm. It was obvious particularly after the second one, that his time was probably running out. He wasn't going to be able to raise a lot of money. And I think he knew that this was going to be an extreme long shot, but he was running because he had people on the Republican side who were perpetuating the story that Donald Trump had put out there, that the election had been stolen from him in 2020. And I think there was some effort there to try to steer the Republican Party back to some degree of sanity. And I think when you get past the personality disputes between Phelan and Patrick, there's some of that playing out too.
Oh yeah, your column on Sunday, the Republican Party left Hurd.
Yeah.
I mean, it was absolutely accurate, and right there, that headline and the way you explain it, I mean, it's absolutely true. I think that he's not extreme enough for them. And that's what you see between Patrick and Phelan too.
Yeah. Greg and I were covering Will Hurd when he first ran for Congress. And I mean, he got in the race, I think, in late 2009. And you could sense that there were people high up in the Republican Party nationally that were thinking, oh, this guy, he's got this great future. And this is somebody we really want to help out. And when he got into Congress, Paul Ryan, I think, was always kind of working out like, this guy's in a tough 50-50 district. We got to work with him. I mean, maybe he's not going to, maybe he won't vote to repeal the Affordable Care Act, but we're going to work with him because they could see that he was a really engaging figure. He was an African-American Republican. He was somebody who got elected in a 50-50 district that was 70% Latino. Obviously, this is somebody who had some unique skills as a politician and credentials coming out of the CIA and everything. Mm-hmm. And so this was something that the Republican Party was really, you could sense they were really trying to build this person up as a future star. And now he really has no place in the Republican Party that I can see.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he never polled higher than 1%, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So no, clearly, they want nothing to do with him. Yeah. I mean, yeah, he's kind of a non-event, his campaign.
Yeah, Rhino now means that you don't go along with the Trump narrative, and I think that's what we're seeing now. Mm-hmm. So we'll end things there. Thank you all so much for listening. Hope you all are doing well, and we'll be back next week. Take care.